Bud and Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, business news has seldom gotten in the way of politics at getting local public attention, but this week, news of a major economic development may have trumped even the mayoral campaign for long-range impact. We'll look at the city taking a big step towards being high-tech, as well as the latest in the campaigns, and we'll browse a tricentennial book with a legacy from an earlier anniversary. On the page for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Kevin Litton, reporter, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune; Kathy Finn, freelance business journalist; and Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate. We're going to go over to Kathy first. And boy, there was a big announcement this week of this high-tech company that's going to locate in New Orleans as its hub and going to create thousands of jobs.
Yes, DXC is the name of the company. It's a combination of a couple of other firms, including an offshoot of Hewlett-Packard. And this company is expanding into New Orleans. They're putting a local office here, as they've done in several cities around the country. It was a big deal. You haven't seen this kind of an announcement in New Orleans in a long time. Mm-hmm. And this involves 2,000 jobs. It's a tech company and 2,000 jobs. Those two things together say a lot about what's going on in New Orleans. And the mayor and everyone else had a lot to tout this week because of that.
And the governor.
And the governor in the state, of course, put a lot of incentive money behind this. But it's a big win, and they're rightfully claiming a victory there, because you don't see this happen that often, where you have that number of jobs and in a tech company. And New Orleans, while it's building a tech reputation and has been for some years, it's not a huge center of all of this kind of thing. And so this bodes well. Now, I think you have to treat it with a bit of caution, because when you get announcements like this and you hear thousands of jobs, I mean, they don't come all at once. They have said that they would hire maybe 300 people next year as a startup, and they'll probably locate in one of the downtown office towers. We don't know the exact location yet. But they intend to ramp up to maybe 2,000 people, 2,000 jobs over about a 5-year period. Mm-hmm. Now, things can happen. Plans can change. And sometimes once they get into a market and they find, well, maybe there aren't as many people as they in the workforce that they thought would be available to them, or their own needs change. We have seen some companies around the state where they initially started out with a certain number of jobs and got the incentive money or portions of it, and then later had to pull back and maybe renegotiate their agreement with the state and do something a little bit different.
Aren't the universities kind of gearing up? I mean, I hear there's
Certainly.
Big excitement at UNO about the possibility, which has been desperately looking for good news.
No kidding.
For a long time.
Well, a big part of the incentive package involves training and education, which it almost always does with these things. And the state puts in, it's actually training money, and they partner with LSU, with UNO in this case, and with Delgado and Southeastern for training in the technical skills that are needed. And since some of that training has been going on with other technical jobs, tech company jobs in the past, again, there is a foundation for this sort of thing, and it's a growing one. Mm-hmm. So it will just take time. But this is a great step up for New Orleans.
What does this company do? We say high tech, but explain.
I really wish you hadn't asked me that, because with all of these companies, with a lot of them, it's very hard to explain. They talk about client solutions and innovations. I guess the best way to look at it is if you have if you have computers, you have any kind of electronic systems, what they do is try to integrate them and customize them, as opposed to buying software off the shelf, for instance, and making everybody do the same things with that software. Companies like this can come in and look at all of the systems you do, information technology, e-commerce, the various things, that you do, and design systems that will work particularly for your company. And they have thousands of clients around the world doing this for them.
I'm curious, 2,000 people in a downtown office building, do we have those kinds of vacancies now?
I'm guessing that maybe they wouldn't all be in one place. And again, 2,000 people isn't going to happen next year.
Yeah.
So
we do have a lot of vacancies, though.
But there are vacancies. I mean, it can work. Remember when Tom Benson took a lot of state employees out of other buildings and put them in the Benson Tower? I mean, that left some holes around there.
Okay.
So it can be configured. They can, and that's probably what they're looking for right now,
Like
is a
the
place where
building?
they can get a good chunk of space that's expandable.
I thought it was significant that they made the announcement at the Superdome. As though to say, this is the neighborhood we'll be in.
I was curious, how much do you think inexpensive labor plays into this? Because a software engineer that's paid in New Orleans is paid quite a bit less than you would pay them in the D.C. area or New York or Silicon
they said
Valley.
that the average salary they pegged for all of the jobs was something like $63,000, which is not a huge number. But I think that plays a big part. That's a good question. And I think some of the other locations that this company has chosen around the country, they include Plano, Texas, El Paso, Pontiac, Michigan. So they're going into places that have lower cost labor, and that's part of their business model. And they're probably, I'm sure they will bring in some of their own people at the highest technical positions, which is a natural thing to do, but then they'll hire locally and gradually grow it.
And the labor force that they are looking for, who's going to be hired?
They will be hiring computer types, programmers, software developers, but also business analysts and project managers that don't necessarily have to have that high-level technical training. So it's a mix.
But if all this comes into fruition at the same time when the hospital complex is developing and the two spill over, that's going to be a really powerful downtown, and that's going to kind of create a whole new core of service jobs. All the cafes and stores, they'll be serving all those people.
Right. I really think the education angle on this is one of the most important ones for the future of New Orleans, because it's really important to train that job force. And the more we can get companies in that are able to draw from the local workforce, the more we will get in.
Certainly training at the college level, but also there's focus now on the high school level too, and secondary education to begin internships in businesses too. All right, Kathy, it is something exciting for this whole community. Thanks a lot. All right, something else that's really exciting, we think so, is the mayor's race finally coming to an end. Election day tomorrow. And so how's it looking?
I wish that we could say we are riding high at the end of this really exciting mayor's race, but I get the sense that come Sunday, people are going to be really excited to see those signs come down and see the political ads go off the air. I think that if you want the smart money, I think LaToya Cantrell is really poised to cruise into the mayor's seat to replace Mitch Landrieu after 8 years, first open seat in quite a while. I like to look at the races and try to learn things from these races, and I think if we were to look at it and break it down by the candidates, you could look at Desiree Charbonnet's campaign, and we could learn that these PACs that attacked her are extremely dangerous. They are extremely effective, and I think if you got to the end of that primary and said that the 9 points that LaToya gained at the end was certainly some of those points came from the attacks from the PACs. I think on the Cantrell side, they started this campaign down in the sort of not the favorite candidate, but also down in fundraising, and I think that her success has a lot to say about some smart investments that they made. Social media, some of the ground game that they got going, and certainly spending all the time that she did running for mayor helped her out a lot.
And so since the primary, she's really increased the fundraising, right? I mean, she surpassed Charbonnet, who was really at the top of the pack.
Right, not
leading
total,
into the primary.
over the course of the election, but at the end. And Charbonnet really started having a lot of trouble raising money, which was a very big change from the beginning.
Right.
I think another lesson is that again, it was not only noteworthy that Charbonnet raised so much money and had so many endorsements at the beginning, but Cantrell really didn't have much of that at all, to the point where people were kind of worried about what was going on. But she ran, it's almost, you look at Hillary and Bernie, you look at kind of where excitement comes from in politics these days, being an outsider probably benefited her, especially looking at, a campaign on the Charbonnet side where she was almost presented as kind of an inevitability, like, big rollout, again, with big endorsements and a lot of money and really a show of force. And yet people didn't really know her, even though she was a citywide official. So there was a little disconnect there, which I also think hurt her and allowed the PACs to help define her, because she wasn't really defined in people's minds.
So, of course, election is tomorrow, so it's not over yet. So in these last weeks, you guys have been really attending one forum after another, starting with pre-primary and then since. What are you all sensing between the two candidates? What are you guys observing? How are they doing in these last hours?
Stephanie hosted a forum that I thought was really interesting in the fact that they didn't really attack each other on Wednesday, maybe attacked each other a little bit the next day, but the attacks really kind of rolled out right after the primary, and I wonder whether or not they look back on that as a mistake. Should we have attacked earlier? If we had all this credit card information that raised questions about LaToya Cantrell's sort of free spending council credit card thing, would that have been more effective to go earlier? And you probably have some thoughts on mistakes as well. Right.
Well, I think, they rolled it out as, again, something, we've got something big. It kind of almost reminded me of, remember back when Ray Nagin was running against Chief Pennington, and Chief Pennington came out and said, I know something about Ray Nagin that sickens me to my core, and that was Lindy Gras, and that it was Mardi Gras, and he didn't tell us. So by the time we found out what it was, it was bad but not terrible. So the buildup, I think, was, this is something really devastating, and once, you kind of looked at it, it's not good, but was it, it's not career-ending, and she used her city credit card in ways that did not comply with the administration's policy, but did comply with the city council's policy for the most part. The fact that she paid back, I think $9,000, give or take, there are two different ways to look at that. One is that it's an admission of guilt, which is the way the Charbonnet people put it, but the way Cantrell put it was, I was just being careful. I was just settling, just in an abundance of caution. And then the information that other members of the council did some of the same things.
Right. Well, you were seated next to the candidates the other day for the WWL radio forum.
Yes.
And how do they interact with one another? How do they seem? Are they ready for this to end?
Did not much. They were sitting right across from me, very close together, almost no eye contact. I think, and you saw it in the WWL TV debate last night. Tensions are very high. There was a real chill in the air, and they were really taking shots, kind of these sideways shots at each other whenever they had an opportunity. One time, Desiree Charbonnet was talking about Airbnbs spreading into residential neighborhoods, and she said, we love our neighborhoods here. This isn't California. We have unique neighborhoods. Of course, California is where Cantrell's from. Right. So there were a lot of little jabs like that, I thought.
I wonder if the presidential race last year has had an impact on politics, if it's kind of alienated people from politics, made them a little bit more disinterested. But also in that race against Trump and against Clinton, you heard a lot of charges that were made. Imagine, 30 years ago, having a relationship with the communists or with Russia, none of it seemed to stick.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's
even the sexual accusations against Trump, none of it seemed to stick. And I wonder if that's kind of transferring down to the lower level. People hear these things and they're just so tired of hearing criticisms that they just don't think about it.
One of the really remarkable stories is how that did not seem to impact LaToya's poll standings at all during the runoff. And I think we'll be studying that and trying to figure out why going forward. Some of it maybe, people had already decided, looked at Charbonnet and decided maybe not, but you would have expected a dip in the polls, and
if elections are good for anything, they're good for bringing up uncomfortable questions. So while President Trump may have been successful, there were a lot of uncomfortable questions raised around sexual harassment, around Russia. In this race, we had questions raised about credit card spending. We really dug into that. We really learned a lot. I think you had David Hammer on last week who said, I wish I knew more about these credit cards before this race started.
And also patronage, also this idea of, what it means to collect a lot of political contributions and what that means for administration going forward.
Okay, I have to move you guys forward now to just at least a little bit of a discussion on the council races, E and B and Orleans. How are we looking? Let's start it with E.
So we've selected 5 members of the New Orleans City Council, 2 outstanding. E is James Gray is the incumbent. He only got, I believe, 38% in the primary, which is very bad for an incumbent. He had a whole bunch of opponents, and he's in a runoff against a woman named Cindy Nguyen, who's kind of a community activist out of the, really strong Vietnamese American community out there in the East.
And we really haven't heard that much.
It's been quiet. It's been, of course it's a referendum on Gray in a lot of ways, because there's always frustration in that district. People don't have the amenities they have in other districts. Everything is just harder to get. And I think Gray, very smart guy, but is not necessarily that constituent friendly the way people perceive it. So it's interesting. And again, Cindy Nguyen has deep roots in the community, is well known. I think, this is one of those races where race could play a factor because it's a majority African American district, kind of overwhelmingly, and James Gray is African American, Cindy Nguyen is Vietnamese American. So, are people, will they kind of vote for someone who's more like them or a change? We don't know.
Okay, let's take a look at B. Council District B.
This is the open seat that LaToya Cantrell is vacating. Jay Banks is a longtime member of Zulu, the Zulu political. He was King of Zulu, longtime member of the Bold political organization, works at the Dryad Street Y there, has been a council aide, really deep roots in the community. And Seth Bloom is an attorney, former school board member. This one's been pretty contentious, I will tell you. I live in this district. I get a lot of mail. And there have been, Seth Bloom has really accused Jay Banks of being the old school machine candidate, played that up. There was a really interesting endorsement of Jay Banks by a primary contestant, Timothy David Ray, who wrote this long screed about Seth Bloom and called him entitled and said he was, met with some of his constituents and was rude to them and kind of thought he was, due an endorsement. And it was really pretty dramatic and kind of rocketed around the district. Okay. So, this is another one that's where there's a lot of tension.
Yeah. Okay,
and
let's
there's
go.
a race factor in this, too.
There is, too.
And the district's pretty much even.
It's pretty much even, and Jay Banks is black and Seth Bloom is white. And again, it's one of the open questions is, do we still have a majority black city council? We don't know. Could be 2 members, 3 or 4.
Treasurers to race.
This
State
is,
treasurer.
again, a weird one. We have, this is to replace John Kennedy. John Schroeder is the Republican, Derek Edwards the Democrat. The presumption is that the Republican wins a statewide race. That's John Schroeder's already talking to John Kennedy's people to try to put the office together. Derek Edwards, though, didn't run a race at all in the primaries, running a little bit of a race in the runoff. But he's a Democrat, and where are people going to turn out to vote? New Orleans, because we have the mayor's race, and there's very little on the ballot in the rest of the state. So, you know what? From what I hear, there are Republicans who are a little nervous, even though they think they've got this one.
So, because there's the theory that the vote here in New Orleans could push Edwards on
And
top.
Edwards got 62% in the primary, really just from being a Democrat on the ballot, and he is on most of the ballots that people are getting on the mail. The party wasn't really behind him then. They are now.
So that really depends on turnout.
It does.
How
It's all about
race would be
turnout.
impacted.
And just a quick footnote that one of the early front runners was Julie Stokes, who was the state representative from Kenner, and she got out of the race when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Today she sent out a statement saying that Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, will be the last of her chemotherapy treatments. That she's still got a way to go, but at least she sees that as an important milestone.
We haven't heard the last of her, I don't think. So.
And best of luck to her.
Of
Okay.
course, yes.
Now, after tomorrow, we will have selected New Orleans will have voted for its
Yes.
next mayor. So starting on Sunday, you're going to have a mayor-elect, and of course, you'll have the sitting mayor, but you're also going to have that situation until next May,
Yes.
which is a little different.
We have an unusual situation. It goes back to the election when Mitch Landrieu was first elected. That day happened to be, the election was in February. It was also the first day of the parade seasons. It was the day before when the Saints were in the Super Bowl. So it was a hard day to concentrate on anything else. It was a great weekend, but it was a joyous weekend. But anyway, and so people said, maybe we shouldn't have elections in February. So there's been a movement by well-meaning people, and I think League of Women Voters and other people, about advancing the election to October and November. But the issue then, the Landrieu people say, well, look, my term's not supposed to end until May. And so the Landrieu people went along with it, but still they want to finish out their term. And so whoever wins tomorrow is going to be just sitting on the side until May when Landrieu's term ends. And that's going to be there's going to be some awkward governmental things. I know Steffi did a column on this today, and I'd like for the comment on it, but
Well, one of the interesting things is the person, if it's LaToya Cantrell, she won't be sitting on the side, she'll be sitting on the city council, where
but
she can govern
to be sitting on the city council and to be a mayor-elect for 6 months is
It's weird. We don't know, she'll be mayor-elect from the city council. Some interesting things could happen there, too.
But the other thing, the assumption that let's move it from February to October, like nothing happens in October in New Orleans, okay? I mean that's almost as busy as a month as
we have
as
no
February.
openings on the calendar at all.
That's ultimately the truth, okay?
Yeah.
We have no, let's all do it by computer because we don't have time for this.
Exactly.
Really.
Yes.
So what do you think is going to happen then in these ones? How do you see
I
it?
think it's going to be really interesting because, as anybody who knows Mitch Landrieu knows, he's not really one to step aside. And but the new mayor, anytime a new mayor comes in, they want to put their staff together. They want to start making their mark. They want to start making decisions. I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be really interesting. And again, this is going to be while the Sewage and Water Board is undergoing all of the changes it's undergoing. The past couple of forums, it's interesting, LaToya Cantrell has mentioned specifically that she expects the new mayor and Mayor Landrieu to jointly hire the next leadership team for the Sewage and Water Board. And that's, of course, one of the most important things the city is facing right now. And, the idea is that it's urgent. You can't wait. The kind of interim leadership team their time is up, and it's hard to find an interim. And but how that will go is, again, they're very strong-willed. They haven't always gotten along, perhaps because they're both strong-willed. Again, if it's LaToya Cantrell, if it's Desiree Charbonnet, obviously the same thing would happen, and she doesn't have the same history with the mayor. But something else to watch, other hires, contracts that will encumber the next mayor, all kinds of big announcements. Who gets to speak first? Right. I mean, I think we're all going to be playing Kremlinologist.
I think one interesting thing to note is that Mitch Landrieu came in at an extremely difficult time. That the way that the Nagin administration turned over things to them, it was a real mess. I mean, the financial, the way that City Hall was run, all of those things. And so if Mitch Landrieu makes it difficult for LaToya, I mean, that's really tough because he knows how hard it was.
But the plan is not to do that. The plan is I know they're putting together big binders. The plan is to really guide them through. I think what could happen would be the opposite, which is we're going to show you how it's done, and maybe the new mayor might resist that.
Well, it's going to definitely be an interesting dynamic and also one to be studied in the future,
Yes.
just like the election itself.
And one time only, because next year we'll go back to the short transition.
All right, over to Kathy. And it looks like condos are spreading.
Oh yes, and they're going downriver. We've seen a lot written lately about Airbnb, of course, and the Advocate did an extensive story about the impact of Airbnbs on other short-term rentals, on the social fabric of the city, really, and certain neighborhoods in particular. And I did an article somewhat like that, but it was more focused on the actual pricing and the numbers and the financials behind these developments. And one thing that I saw was that the condos are really pushing downriver in part because of the pricing upriver. New Orleans right now, how much residential development there is in downtown New Orleans, including the Warehouse District and other areas, and it's apartments and condominiums. And the pricing has just gone sky high. Now again, Airbnb has a lot to do with that because a lot of people a lot of the owners are putting them up for sale as Airbnbs, which means, and if you're renting out the property, you can afford to pay a higher rent on that property or a higher price for the property when you buy it. And so that is driving the price of condominiums upward. And what has happened is they've gone so high in the city of New Orleans, and now that the French Quarter area has, enforcement has been stepped up of the existing laws, which prohibit new Airbnbs or new short terms there. Things are moving to places where they can find properties and build or renovate or whatever. So what we're seeing is some pretty significant condominium developments in Bywater and Marigny, and particularly in Bywater. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago, a 70-unit condominium building, brand new building, opened up, or ground was broken for it, I should say. It hasn't actually been built yet, but there are going to be, I think, 72 condominiums in there. Price per square foot is going to range somewhere up into $450 per square foot on these, plus, of course, your association fees and all of that.
And those will be Airbnbs, too, so a lot of them will.
The interesting thing was that the property marketers on this made no bones about it. They said, these are Airbnb compliant.
I've noticed that in ads, that they're advertising
and so
Airbnb
they are
approved.
selling them for that purpose.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, upriver, many of the condominiums that have been sold have gone as high as $750 a square foot. So that's why they're moving
It's going to
downriver.
be interesting to see how that trend moves along, if those properties hold their value. Too.
It's happening fast, I can tell
real
you.
fast. All right, Kathy, thanks a lot. Errol wanted to say something about a very special book that's been published.
Well, just a little background. In 1968, at the time of the 250th anniversary of New Orleans, a man named Harding Carter, who was very much of a respected journalist, who was a professor emeritus at Tulane at the time, put together a book where he got 14 people to write chapters about different aspects of New Orleans history up to that period. It's a fascinating book, and to me it's always been a Bible. I always carry it with me wherever I go. It's an important book, and so I always thought it'd be great to be, at some point, to be able to do something in respect for this. And so with the tricentennial, we were able to put together a book called New Orleans, the First 300 Years. This has 24 people, and it's a combination. Here's the book right here.
There's all the people on the back.
Yeah, and these are the people. Okay. It's a combination of academics and journalists. We look at a whole bunch of categories: architecture, disasters, celebrations, and I think it's an important book, and it's part of it. And then Pelican published it, and actually at the time, 50 years ago, Harding Carter owned Pelican, and so Pelican's still involved with it. And they were nice enough to donate some books to Channel 12 to use for a fundraiser at the same time, even though it's still available at bookstores around town. But a chapter on politics, and it goes all over the spectrum. Just very proud about it, and I just wanted to mention it.
It is really, really a wonderful book. New Orleans, the first 300 years.
The first 300 years,
and it's a real good partner to Peg's new documentary, which just premiered this week. New Orleans.
Even though it's not like a script to the documentary,
Right.
I mean, it's a separate project with different essays and different things, and
so you can really get your history about New Orleans from both the book and also from the
one book.
documentary. So go buy the book and also become a member of WIS. You can get both the DVD of the documentary and the book, too. So you can take a look at that at WIS.org. Looking ahead.
Okay, in that book, in the very first chapter, the very first sentence, Harding Carter wrote this. He said, he was describing Louisiana. He said, "In this place, the roseau cane rose in a cruel thickness from the marsh and swampland." That was his first sentence, talking about roseau cane in the swampland. Today, the LSU Department of Agriculture sent out a press release. There's a big crisis with roseau cane because of insects, and they've developed a website where people can monitor the condition of roseau cane. It's a big environmental issue. So 300 years later, it's still something that's really important to us.
We're still really concerned about that roseau cane.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Ian. Kevin.
I'm looking forward to getting some rest after this election, but looking forward, I think that in the next 6 months, the council's going to have a really interesting and robust agenda if they want it. There are major issues before them. They could do stormwater fees. They could do strip club regulations. They've got a decision to make about the Entergy plant. I'm already starting to hear that Mitch Landry's administration might pull back a little bit on some of that ambitious agenda, but we'll see.
We'll see. Kathy.
Watch for more condominium announcements. I think, I mentioned that they're going downriver. I think you'll see announcements of even newer ones, and they're getting closer and closer to the river itself.
Interesting. Steph.
We are going to get a break from elections, but not for long, because if you just cross the 17th Street Canal, sheriff's race already hot and heavy.
That's right. That's coming up in the spring.
coming up in
Jefferson
March.
Parish.
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.